Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Royal Nugget Podcast. And here I am, your coach, Sharon, the Retirement Coach Diva, and I am excited to have another wonderful guest this episode. And so I want to welcome Paula, who is another coach, and she is able to tell us all about how we're going to be reimagining like retirement and aligning that with our purpose, our health, and energy to as we go into this next chapter of our lives after retirement. Because, you know, many of us work 20, 30, 40 years at the same job or doing the same type of career. It could have been in multiple places. And we get really attached to what we do. And so, Paula, Coach Paula, is going to tell us about how she works with her clients in various ways to move from being connected to that title into that next journey of life, whatever that looks like for a client. So, welcome, Coach Paula, to the Royal Nugget Podcast.
Thank you, Sharon, and good evening. Yeah, I'm really excited to have this chance to talk to people about how to unleash their own life force. As you said, I really focus a lot on people's energy and how they can align that together with their purpose and their health, which is really important as, we're in this retirement age. So we want to make sure that, we're really thinking about all the important aspects in our life.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that our listeners and those watching now, as well as those that might be watching the recording in the future, just drop into the comments any questions that you might have or any comments that you might have for us. Put it in the chat or the comment box so we can respond to you and be able to have an engaging conversation. Because if you have been watching other episodes and following along with me, I don't like to just have a presentation or just talking, even though I know Paula and I are going to have a great conversation today, but we want you to be included. So make sure that you are putting your comments and thoughts into the chat as we're going along. So let's go ahead and get started into this session. Paula, could you please tell us about who you are and how you got started with your current business, where you are in life?
Sure. So for the purpose of the topic, purpose coaching, I'm going to go back in the time machine and just mention that when I was in my early 20s, I actually was living overseas in Poland and then had an opportunity to go to Thailand to visit a friend, where I did a 10-day silent meditation at an ashram in Thailand. So it's a religious location. And basically you're up at 4:30 in the morning and you learn to meditate. And I kind of kick off with this because it was a pivotal moment for me. And it really set the stage for who I became, including my interest in coaching and well-being. After I left Thailand, I went on and started my life and hit a lot of transitions and found myself going back to meditation and yoga that I had also practiced there. And along the way, I started going into management when I was in the federal government, and I got my very first coach. And I realized that what she did for me was something I desperately wanted to do for others, which was really help them find their voice, find a way to stand in their power, and use questions as a way to help others find for themselves what was most important. And I really loved that approach. And so I was in the federal government 22 years. I started coaching there about, I guess 13 years ago now. So I got my coaching degree at New Ventures West, which was an amazing experience out in San Francisco. And then I got to use my coaching with federal employees as a leadership coach. I got to go into classes, do one-on-one coaching as part of the curriculum. Also jumped into retirement coaching, helping people really use the gifts that they already had in order to leap into the next stage.
Yes. So That's wonderful. And I love what you said about coaching. It's you said find for themselves. You help people to find for themselves what is important. And sometimes I find that it's hard to really describe coaching in that manner for people to understand, because there are so many various types of coaches out here that a lot of people call themselves coaches in different ways. But I know the way that you and I were trained is more of just what you said, helping them find what's important for themselves, helping to create what that looks like for themselves, and the path that they want to take for themselves, where we're just there to help them along the way.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not easy for people to understand unless they go through the experience. And coaching can be confused with a sports coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you and I know that it's similar in the sense that it can be inspiring and motivating, but it's also different that it's not directive in any way.
Correct, correct. And so you're doing something that you don't really hear too many people talk about doing, and that's retirement coaching. And
Mhm.
so I was wondering, when people hear the word retirement, they often think, about finances, which of course that is very important when you're retiring. You want to make sure all of your finances are in order, because it's a big shift in income. But from your perspective, what does it mean to reimagine retirement beyond the money?
Yeah, so for me, it's really about becoming a fuller expression of yourself. It's coaching, going into retirement or when you just entered retirement or trying to make that decision. It's about finding who you are today and then leaping from there. And then what do you want to do with that or not do with that?
Mm,
Right. So it's again, our purpose changes throughout our life so many different times depending on what's happening around us. So it is a new opportunity, just like you said, to reimagine or re-examine who you are.
yes, exactly. And again, you're saying some great nuggets, because you said that it gives a person to look and examine where they are right now and see where they want to be or don't want to be. And
Mhm.
that's important, because I think a lot of times when we think about retirement or really transitions, right? We think about what we want, and it could be as big or elaborate or very small. But we kind of we don't think about the things that we don't want to be part of that journey, to be part of um, that next step, that transition. And also, it can be hard to move from where we are to where we want to be, or
Mhm.
to disconnect those things that we don't want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to start out the conversation, I like to use a pathway. I call it vive, which in French means to really embrace life. And so VIVE, which stands for looking at your values, your identity, your vision, and then examining those next steps and exploring. Um, so yeah, I think there's definitely a part of that journey where you have to consider what do I want to let go of, and oftentimes in that journey, it's around your identity. That's a really big part of who you were in your last job may not be who you become in this next stage in life.
Yeah, so that's a great transition to my next question for you, is because as you work with your clients, how do you help someone to reconnect with their purpose, or even to determine what that new purpose is as they're transitioning out of a career or any role that they might have before?
Yeah, so I like to follow these four steps. The first is looking at your values because it is your compass. right? It's what will guide you moving forward. And sometimes your values can change, right? And over time, maybe in retirement, you value family and friends more than you have in the past, or maybe not, really. Everybody's different. So there are exercises you can do to first take a look at your values. One really simple way is to think of like 3 people who are really important to you in your life, right? And when you think of those 3 people, what are some of those attributes that they had that you really found impressive? For me, for example, it would be my grandmother, my husband, and sometimes I like to go off the beaten path and I look to think of King Arthur from Camelot, right? And when I think through all of the attributes they had, really all of them had resilience and creativity. And so I know for me, those are 2 things that are really important. So it's a very simple exercise to first start with looking at kind of what's important to you and your values. And then, earlier I mentioned identity, which really it provides your direction and your motivation and really helps ground you when you have a better sense of who am I today, right? And, I don't want to skip over a really important fact. When you go into retirement, often there's a mourning period, right? You're mourning the loss of who you were, that identity piece. And even though people think maybe I'm grieving the work or maybe the finances and the money that came with that, but it's also around a sense of relevance, community, structure, routine, right? And that's it's important to give yourself space to mourn those things, because you're going to be shifting into something new, but you have to, or it's very helpful to honor what is no longer there.
Yes. I remember someone telling me that they were ready to retire, like they were ready to leave, to stop working, but they weren't ready for what life was supposed to be after they stopped working. Like they weren't prepared for that mentally. And I kept that in mind because we don't think about those things. I like talking about before, we normally think about our finances. But before I go into talking about how to about anything financial, because we know that that I'm sure that's a topic that comes up for you when you're talking with your clients. You mentioned about values, and we know, the positive things that we want, but also when it comes to values, there are some boundaries that we want to set up. I know, like for myself, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I had my business already, said this is the things I'm doing. And then I saw this opportunity, this opportunity, this opportunity. And so being able to set up boundaries is important because you don't want to spread yourself thin just because it seems like you may have more time. Like, how do you help your clients to make sure that they're setting up proper and healthy boundaries?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So first thing is to slow down. Like I said, give yourself some time to recover from your last job. You mentioned a lot of people, particularly in this area and other areas, they're really hardworking and they may not have had a great balance in their life. So their health may have suffered, maybe family or friendships. And so it's starting by giving yourself a little grace and a little bit of time to heal and to rebalance yourself, right? Figure out, what does healthy look like for me in all those different aspects of your life. And the setting of boundaries, it can be really difficult because you don't know, do I want to jump into, serving the community? Do I want to jump into my church? And people are very curious. So I find it's okay to give yourself permission to literally like try on a jacket, right? So maybe I'm going to try on for a little bit this nonprofit jacket, and I want to see what it feels like to help read to children. Or maybe I want to try on this jacket and maybe I need to go back to work. But just remember that depending on your situation, you may have a lot more flexibility than you had in the past. So you can take your time as you're, finding out what is right for you.
Yes, yes, and that's important that you take your time. Like you said, give yourself grace when you are maybe already in retirement or even planning to go into retirement, because you may not know exactly what that lifestyle may look like. And sometimes people are retiring not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And we saw that over the past year and a half where people
Mhm.
left their jobs, not always because they wanted to and they were ready to retire, but because they had to. So how do you deal with, well, how do you work with your clients who may have left their jobs, left what they were connected to, not because of choice, but because of force?
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely know of a lot of people who are in that situation, unfortunately. And it starts with turning inward and acknowledging those emotions, right? What am I feeling? Is it grief? Is it anger? Is it maybe shame of some sort, losing a job if maybe it wasn't your choice? What's out there? Because as we all know as coaches, if we stuff them down, that doesn't help us move forward. In fact, it now creates this giant block in our ability to really switch identities and move to the next place. And so acknowledging all of those emotions, facing them, working through them. And part of that is, that name it to claim it. Let's put it on the table. Let's look at it. Don't
Mhm.
judge it. Let's just explore that emotion so we can work with it, set it aside, and move on.
Yeah, I like that. Name it and claim it, because we, and I'll say we, like as women, will just stuff it down like that. You put on that superwoman cape and try to just do everything and take on everything, knowing that there's still a lot within us that we have to address. And we don't put our own oxygen mask on first, then we're not able to help others. So I wanted to ask you also, going back to what I was saying about finances. There are a lot of times where people are financially ready to retire, but they may not be mentally, emotionally prepared. And so, what type of exercises do you do? Because I know that you are also experiencing Reiki. So, how do you incorporate that into what you're doing with your clients?
Ooh, okay. Reiki. So, for those who don't know what Reiki is, I consider it an energetic massage for the mind, body, and soul, right? So, Reiki stands for universal energy that flows all around us. It's what makes the trees and grow and the grass, etc. And it's using that energy, bringing it to a client, and then helping that person heal themselves. And so you gave that example of that. Say I was forced to leave my job, right? Um, what I do recommend for people is combining Reiki and coaching. So coming to the session with a coaching topic,
Mhm.
talking about it, putting it out there, and what is your intention for the session, like you would normally do. And then I would use Reiki, which basically called hands-on healing, but in reality, I don't touch the client at all. You're fully clothed, maybe you just don't have your shoes on,
Mhm.
and it's moving hands over the body, staying about 2-3 inches above the body, so that there's an energy field there,
Mhm.
right? And I consider myself a window. I am like a window that directs the light and love to the person in front of me. And then we all have these great healing abilities. And so it's the ability of that person to take on that light and heal themselves, work through whatever issues it is. What's really cool with Reiki is there are certain symbols that can work with a lot of coaching topics that come up. right? There's a symbol for working with the shadow self, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And symbols are part of what the practitioner uses um, as they're sending or allowing the light to come through to the client. And there's also a way to work with sending the client peace, right? When we're in transition, we're moving from one job to another job or another stage of life, it's very difficult, right? There's a lot of upheaval emotionally, as you said. So, Reiki is an opportunity to help a client sort of rebalance, let go of some of that stress, help their mind, their body, and their soul reset so
Mm-hmm.
that they can then go on and we can go on and talk about the coaching topics. Right. And so then after a session, we would talk about what was the experience of receiving that energy, having it flow through. Some people feel heat in their hands. They might feel like a twitch as the energy moves through. They might see some things,
Mm-hmm.
others, or have memories or ideas pop up. So we talk about it and then we throw in the coaching topic. How does that relate to what's happening? How can you move forward with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds very exciting. Like, because I'm thinking, like, as you were just saying about moving your hands across someone, even virtually, I'm imagining this going on and how it can be, soothing, how it can, just sitting calmly, like you said, with your feet flat on the floor, or however comfortable you are, and just even imagining that going on, I can sense how that can be very calming for a client, especially being in person. I think because you being there with them, the energy could probably be even more, could be stronger than virtual.
Yeah, and I would say just like in a coaching engagement, there's a little bit of preparing myself and preparing the room so that it's positive and welcoming to somebody who comes in. And usually with Reiki, a person, they lie usually on a massage table, but they can also sit down if they have back problems or something's not comfortable for them. So yeah, there's lots of ways to work with it. And a really interesting fact is that Reiki is used in over 80 hospitals in the United States,
Mm.
often with cancer patients or with others. It's to complement other therapies or medical assistance. And so I also find that very similar to coaching. I think many of us probably work with people who have therapists, right? And what we do is not to go back in time to maybe what was the original cause of an issue, but to work with someone from here forward.
Hmm.
And that's what Reiki does as well, is it helps clear out any obstacles and help the person move forward. So it can even help you release a bad behavior,
Mm.
release an idea that's getting in your way, that maybe I'm not enough,
Mm.
or I couldn't possibly try this thing I've never done before in retirement.
Hmm.
And the energy can help release that from your self, so that you can go forward as you need to.
Yes, yes. So I know that I put your information up for everyone to see, but if you could just say how people can get in touch with you in case they're interested in learning more about how they can work with you.
Oh, great. Yeah. So if you go to the website, which is www.lifeforceunleashed.com, up on the site, or you can email me at paula@lifeforceunleashed.com. And happy to do a free consultation with anyone who wants to better understand whether it's just coaching, just Reiki, or the combination. So I work with people who are going into retirement. I work with people in transition, and so happy to talk with anyone just to see what's possible.
Great, great. So for someone who might be 5 or 10 years away from retirement, what should they start to do now to build that healthier retirement that's purposeful and gives them what they need in that transition.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm really big into someone's well-being. And so we all want to have a really long retirement and
Yeah.
really enjoy it, right, for many, many years. And
Mhm.
so, in order to make sure that your health is where it needs to be, I encourage people to look at four areas: physical, emotional, social, and spiritual, right? So start thinking about in those four areas. For one, physical, what level of vitality would you like? What do you want to be experiencing right now? And if maybe you find yourself, working late all the time and you're not able to have that level of energy that you really want, what's one small step you can take so that you have that physical ability to go and enjoy retirement and do whatever it is that you want to do in retirement, whether it's travel or hike or, hold the grandkids, whatever it might be. When it comes to the emotional side of things, really getting in touch with those deep and challenging emotions, because those are the ones that can really get stuck. They get stuck in our body. They stop the flow, the energy flow, the life force. And so really addressing maybe who have I not forgiven?
Mm.
And whether you want to actually give them a call, go see them, or just even in your own mind, let go of whatever's keeping you back from forgiving someone. And then the social side, we can all think of relationships that need nurturing,
Mhm.
and so putting those in place so the people you want around you when you retire are there,
Mhm.
right? And that could also be letting go of people who are maybe stealing your energy, those energy vampires, or folks who aren't supportive of who you are and who you want to become. And that's just part of the shedding that we do as we go through life. And then finally, that spiritual part, which one could, think about as what inspires you, what feels deeply important to you right now, right?
Mhm.
And that's part of that spiritual exploration of my essence, who's there, and who do I want to cultivate, and start thinking about that now. So when you have, when you're in retirement, perhaps more time on your hands, you are already doing the work, and you're already, maybe at that goal that you want, where you become the person that you've been looking forward to.
Okay. So, do you work with retirees, like after they've already been retired sometime and they still might feel stuck or disconnected, not sure what to do next?
So most of the people I've worked with are folks who are trying to make the decision or have made the decision, but honestly are sometimes terrified about what next. Or, they might have life circumstances, like kids are in different locations and they have elder care issues, and they want to
Mm.
find time for them, but they have to put it in context of who else is in their life that they are responsible for.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so, for those who might be dealing with financial issues, how do you work with clients that even though they are ready to retire, they still might feel that financially they might feel that way, even though that might not be reality, but they may feel that they're not financially ready. How do you work with those clients?
Yeah, it's such an important question, right? Because that's what can sustain us moving forward. And I would encourage everyone to go talk to a financial planner. I know so many people who didn't think they could retire. And then when they really sat down and looked at the numbers, talked with their family and friends or an advisor, they were surprised about what they could do.
Mm.
Um, and maybe there's no change in lifestyle. Maybe that requires, moving somewhere else, or just being careful with their lifestyle. So there's lots um, of course, lots of aspects of, the financial part, but don't just assume you can't. Take a look.
Mhm. That's true. That's true. And Yeah, prior to my retirement, I did do just that. I sat down with my financial planner and realized that, hey, I did have enough to, to be able to retire and live comfortably and do the things that I wanted to do. So that is a um, that's a great recommendation, because sometimes people, like I said, they go out because of force. They're not given that opportunity
Mhm.
to really, look at their finances. And we know that finances dictate a lot of things that go on in retirement, not just like material things, but also with our health. If our finances aren't in order, then it could cause stress. It can cause all types of other things. So we know that those kind of work hand in hand with
Mhm.
making sure that they have a healthy retirement.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to recognize. I just know so many people. I would use the term who are workaholics, and I would say that when you go into
Hmm.
retirement, sometimes that's the hardest thing, is not to feel like I have to do something right now. I must solve a problem, right? And it's a mindset, it's an expectation, it's a value. It covers so many different things. And so I really encourage people, if you are one of those individuals who are grinding every day, take a moment and ask yourself, what's behind that life choice? And it is a choice,
Hmm.
right? And what mindset would have to shift in order to allow me to more enjoy and fully engage in life in the next stage.
Mm, exactly. Yes, exactly. So I was thinking about, um, how people can work and feel like that's all there is. Like like you were mentioning, that they not just workaholics, but they work longer, many years after they're eligible to retire. So if someone is in that space, like because they may have grown children, or they just feel like, what are they going to do if they retire? They're going to die. I've heard people say that, like, if
Mhm.
I retire, what am I going to do? I'm going to die. So what is it that you would say to someone with that mindset?
Yeah, that's neither right nor wrong, right? For each person, that's a choice what gives them joy,
Mm-hmm.
so, would explore that, is where is the joy for you in continuing to work, and just help them, if there's no joy, okay, let's talk about that. If I love
Mm-hmm.
this, let's talk about that. And yeah, it's important for people to perhaps start putting on another jacket while they keep a job,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if they want to get another job after retirement, do they want to maybe volunteer for 1 hour a month and
Mm-hmm.
just try something different, dip their toe into it and see what that feels like?
Right.
Or maybe pick up a new hobby
Mm-hmm.
that's not too time consuming, right? Because we want to balance, what's happening in our lives, and just slowly try on these different jackets and see if any of them really start calling you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, yeah, it's just another way to say you don't have to fully commit one way or the other right away, but just be open to and vive the the experiment and explore.
Yes, yes, that's true. Experiment. I like that, because it's neither fully leaving, it's neither fully staying. It's giving an opportunity to, like I said, test some things out to see which one is the best fit. Like I said, putting on that jacket and seeing what's the best fit. Is it a leather jacket? Is it a linen jacket? Is it a cotton? Is it a pullover? What is it that really fits well for you? And it might fit well for that time, and then you might feel later on, oh, this didn't, it looked good in the store, but it doesn't look good as I thought once I get out in the light, so,
Exactly. Yeah.
so being able to have that flexibility, and that you said neither is right or wrong, just finding what fits best for you as a person. Because a lot of times, especially when I worked in the federal government, there were many people who were connected to the mission of the agency, and that gave them purpose. And
Mhm.
so that's where they stayed, because they knew that the mission of the agency and what they were doing gave them purpose. And we know that for a lot of people, that if whether they're entrepreneurs or they're working for someone else, what they're doing could give them purpose. And finding purpose in other things might be helpful, putting on a different jacket and learning what those are.
Absolutely. And one exercise you could do is using visualization, right? Which I love with clients. I'd say, most people are visual people.
Mhm.
So really asking people, what does your heart desire, right, is a really powerful question. You know, maybe you love what you do, but your heart has, desires also something else. And then visualizing yourself rocking on a chair, at whatever age comes to mind, and looking back and
Hmm.
seeing yourself doing that thing your heart desires.
Hmm.
And what is that? And then draw it, paint it, talk about it, sketch it out, really, and then go into the details and what does that feel like? And really own it
Hmm.
and see if that inspires you to take a step forward. Oftentimes, I find the hardest part is people don't know what they want to do, right? They just like, oh my gosh, if you just give me a blank slate, where do I start? So you could start with that visualization, and then oftentimes purpose. I heard this in a TV show and I really liked it. Purpose is using the gifts that you've developed throughout your life.
Mm.
So what gifts, do you feel like you have? Are you a great speaker? Are you wonderful at writing? Do you love to fix things? Are you good with children or elderly? What is it that just comes naturally to you? There's a really good chance that you can find purpose around that gift or many gifts that.
Mhm. Right. And normally our values are connected to our purpose. So
Mhm.
what do you value? And then you could also see how that would lead you to what you could do, what your purpose is during that time.
Exactly.
Yes. So I have one a final question for you, and if listeners could take away one message from our conversation about aligning purpose, health, and energy in retirement, what would you want that message to be?
Hmm. Find ways to make this subconscious conscious, right? So be brave, put it on the table. What do you really want? What's in your heart? And then explore it further.
Wow. Wow, that's great. That is great. Coach Paula, thank you so much. And once last time, if you could tell people about how they can get in touch with you. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you now, you may, or in the future, how would they be able to contact you?
Yeah, so I invite people to go to my website at lifeforceunleashed.com, or feel free to email me at paula@lifeforceunleashed.com. And I have currently stepped into a job with a nonprofit. So if someone's interested in what is that like, going from federal to a nonprofit, happy to talk to them about that as well. The nonprofit is She Believes in Me, working with disadvantaged children in the area. And it's just another way that I'm happy to help people explore and experiment with what's next.
Great. Well, it sounds like you are walking in your purpose in the things that you've been doing as you reimagined your life after working in the federal government. So, thank you for your service as a federal employee, and thank you for being on the Royal Nugget Podcast today.
Thank you. With much gratitude. Take
Thank
care.
you. You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you coming and taking your time out today. And I want to thank our listeners for being here. Again, make sure you're dropping some nuggets into the chat on what you're thinking and what you would like to hear more about in these episodes, because we've had a lot of different things. So just let me know what else you have interest in, so we can have a guest here to talk about, or you and I can just talk about it. So again, thank you all for listening and have a great night.